Hi everybody, ronarray here, and today I'm going to showcase my Lightning Storm Druid leveling build. I have worked on this build before the season and it was used by my co-streamer to level up to 100 in less than a day. Overall, build works really good, it can just clear screens with AoE and it's still working alright even against a single target. Right now it's one of the best leveling builds available, especially for Druid, which could be a little slower than different classes, but overall still an absolute beast. Let's go further and look what kind of items and aspects you will need to make it work. The main set of abilities for the build is pretty straightforward. We are using Lightning Storm as our main dealing damage skill. We are also using Poison Creeper to do damage at the start, especially when we just don't have enough energy regeneration to make use of the Lightning Storm. We're also using some defensive skills and Trample to mostly just stack our spirit. That way we can pretty much focus on our Lightning Storm and crowd control enemies with Poison Creeper. Poison Creeper also will do a lot of damage early in the game and will fall off later. And we are pretty much using Wind Shear just to get movement speed and run around faster. That combination allows us to clear a lot of enemies at the same time with pretty great AoE of Lightning Storm and pretty great AoE of Poison Creeper as well. Let's look at our skill tree. Generally we just taken Wind Shear for the passive Fierce Wind Shear right here, because it gives us 5% movement speed every time when we are hitting enemy with a Wind Shear for 5 seconds. We can stack it up to 20%, it's a pretty good bonus, and make sure that you use Wind Shear from time to time to just run faster, which is pretty important for fast leveling. Moving forward, I'm taking Wild Impulses because it's a great deal to deal more damage with your core skills, and more Spirit is not that bad. Generally we are taking Lightning Storm, all 5 points right here, together with Enhanced Lightning Storm and Primal Lightning Storm. Primal Lightning Storm is pretty important since we are taking a lot of bonuses against immobilized enemies. That way Lightning Storm can pretty much immobilize enemies for 3 seconds with a pretty alright chance. And since Lightning Storm hitting enemies like many times because of different lightnings, it will give us much more chance to immobilize enemies overall. Moving forward, I'm taking Earthen Bulwark because it's an amazing defensive skill that will protect you in so many different situations. Right now it just works just perfect together with passives like Enhanced Bulwark and Preserving Earthen Bulwark 2 for Fortify. I'm also taking Blood Hole because I think it's a pretty good skill. It is healing the character, but the most important stuff here is Preserving Blood Hole. It gives us attack speed, and attack speed is very important for Lightning Storm success. So that way we can just strike faster, and it will make our Lightning Storm much more effective. I'm taking Vigilance together with Ancestral Fortitude as passives right here to just stack more defensive parts. After it, we are taking Nature's Reach because enemies should be pretty distant from us in the most time, and we can double this bonus if they're like slowed, stunned, immobilized or knocked back. That's a pretty amazing passive because that way we can just get double the bonus against immobilized enemies and we are just immobilizing them all the time. Then I'm taking the Creeper. Earlier in the game you can put like 5 points in the Creeper, but after that it's just recommended to drop it and leave only 1 for crowd control. I'm using Enhanced Poison Creeper to immobilize enemies with Poison Creeper itself, and Brutal Poison Creeper because 20% critical strike chance is just amazing against all the enemies strangled by Poison Creeper. So when you're clicking your Poison Creeper, you're receiving 20% of critical strike chance, and that bonus will make your damage skyrocket. Moving forward, I'm taking the passives here, like Elemental Exposure, to make enemies vulnerable, Charged Atmosphere, which is pretty alright, and 3 points to Electric Shock, because that way we will get more damage against immobilized enemies again. I'm also putting 1 point to Bad Omen, but it's not that important, it's just like pretty nice thing. I'm using Trample right here, just to move faster, and for Savage Trample, because Savage Trample gives us 40 Spirit And for the spirit, it's just amazing when you're just running from packs to packs and you need to reset your spirit. It helps really heavily. That way you can just trample forward and get spirit out of nowhere. I'm also taking 1 point to neurotoxin, so poisoned enemies should be slowed. It's just another way to crowd control them, and it should stack a lot with our different passives. It's not that important, and if you want to drop it, you can pretty much do that. Moving forward, as another passive, I'm taking Defiance for more damage, together with Natural Disaster for more damage again, against immobilizing enemies, and Resonance, which will pretty much gives us basic damage increase. I'm also putting 2 points to the Circle of Life, because that way we can heal ourselves with nature magic skills that consume spirit, and Lightning Storm is such a skill. Out of key passives, I can just prefer Perfect Storm because you don't really need any kind of aspects, and that way you can always get more spirit even when you are casting Lightning Storm. Because most of the time the enemies that you're attacking are just like vulnerable, immobilized, or slowed. You can try to play with different passives, for example, Arcane Strength is a pretty good one at the start because while healthy you are dealing like 25% damage, so if you don't really need more spirit you can always go with Arcane Strength, right here. So talking about the aspects that we can use. Generally we have a few different ones that can help us to reach enough amount of power to pretty much level with it. Overall, I really prefer aspect of accelerating on your two-handed or on the amulet, because pretty much you're doing a lot of critical strikes with core skills, and attack speed is pretty important for Lightning Storm. You will hit much faster. So even if you will lose spirit much faster too, you still will do more damage in just some particular amount of time. And that's pretty much why I think accelerating works that well. It will give you a lot of more opportunities to burst enemies. Second would be the aspect of the umbral. It doesn't matter which one you will drop, like 1, 2, 3 or 4, it just works so good. So if you have one aspect of the umbral, make sure you kinda slap it on your ring and it will work out really good for you, because you need that amount of primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. Another pretty good aspect would be Inner Calm, because Inner Calm gives you 30% of pretty much free damage. You can just use it on gloves or ring or on some place like that. For the amulet, I really prefer Overcharged, because Overcharge aspect works pretty good to increase your overall damage. That way you can overload the target, causing any direct damage you deal to them will pulse additional damage around surrounding enemies. It will raise your AoE potential pretty high, and I think it's a pretty important aspect as well. On top of that, I think if you will have something like Conduit aspect, it should be a really great option as well. Because with a Conduit you can just create more lightning attacks and it will work pretty good both at single target and on AoE. You can also use some kind of aspects for defense, whatever ones that you will drop, like aspect of the might or aspect of disobedience, any of them will pretty much do just fine. So talking about the stats on the items, since it's a leveling build, you don't really need to pay a lot of attention to them. You still will need to roll at least some good bonuses. For example, on your staff, I usually recommend like all stats, willpower, core skill damage, or damage to close or distant enemies, depends on what kind of type you're picking. Damage against crowd control is working pretty alright as well. You just will need movement speed at the boots, it's pretty important, so just try to get it in the most cases, and spirit cost reduction will really help you as well. On defensive items, like on the chest armor, you can go with damage reduction, additional health, and all stats, for example. That goes for almost all items, so you can also roll percent to total armor, which is pretty good currently. Additional maximum life, damage reduction from distant, and damage reduction from close. On your jewelry, you will need critical strike chance, maximum life, and additional bonuses to damage if it's possible, like critical strike damage or damage to crowd controlled enemies. On your amulet, you can roll spirit cost reduction, movement speed, and any kind of damage and bonuses that will pretty much work. In the Paragon, you're also receiving additional bonus from damage to close and damage to distant enemies. So if you can, both damage to close and damage to distance should be picked in the most cases. So the spirit boons for the leveling builds are pretty simple as well. At the first spirit boon set, you're always picking Varanus to just take reduced damage from elites. It's a pretty good buff because you will be much more tanky with it. Second one, I'm always going for Keys Talons because 5% increased critical strike chance is amazing, and I decided to take Avian Wrath because right now it's multiplicative and it's a pretty huge buff. However, if you don't really like Avian, you can just go for swooping attacks because attack speed is always good for Lightning Storm. The next boon should be kinda different. At the start, it's a good idea to go with the Pack Leader. But later on, I honestly prefer to go with Bolster to just survive better at higher tiers of the Nightmare dungeons. So I would say Pack Leader will work pretty good until at least 70, and after that Bolster is definitely better choice. And the last boon is pretty much obvious, it will be Overload, because it stacks very well with lightning damage that we are dealing consistently. So the whole Paragon set is pretty simple and just focused on pretty much stacking your mobilizing of enemies on top of additional damage buffs and some protections here and there. So at the first, I'm taking Fulminate because it's a pretty good bonus. It will give you increased lightning damage both against healthy and injured enemies and lightning damage as a whole. I'm both taking Tenacity and Prime for damage and life right here and going up through Resolve. The next board is pretty much Thunderstruck. Thunderstruck it's a pretty good legendary node because Thunderstruck give you damage bonus based on your damage vs close or damage vs distant enemy bonuses. As a leveling build we don't have a lot of those bonuses, but it's still a pretty nice cherry on top. So I just go to the left and take Earth, Earth and Sky for damage reduction and Storm skill damage bonuses. That way we also will get some damage bonuses against crowd controlled and vulnerable enemies. I'm going to the right, taking Thunderstruck together with Tempest for additional critical strike damage and vulnerable damage. Then I'm exiting through the left, and the next board is pretty much Ancestral Guidance. Since we are spending a lot of spirit, because Lightning Storm eats a lot of spirit just by being cast itself, I think Ancestral Guidance is a pretty good way to boost your damage. Right here, the glyph should be the Keeper, and we also will deal more non-physical damage because of that. I'm taking some resistances, just to make sure resistances are capped and we are much more tanky because of that, together with Harmony bonuses to core skill damage, which is additive and should work pretty nice. After that, I'm exiting down there, and the next board is Constricting Tendrils. We are going down there and taking Constricting Tendrils itself, because that way we will have another way to immobilize the enemies. We will also poison them, and it will stack with some of our passive skills, and will deal some kind of damage as well. As a glyph I'm using Exploit right here, just to make enemies vulnerable more often. I'm also taking Superiority and Devastation. Devastation is a pretty nice damage bonus, and Superiority can give us bonus against damage to crowd control enemies, and most of enemies should be crowd controlled when we are fighting them. Going to the left, the next board should be Heightened Malice. We're not really going for legendary node here, with just taking the entrance and placing Spirit in there. We need Spirit mostly for additional damage bonus, because it will give us nice multiplicative bonus on top. We're also taking some additional dexterity around here together with Sinking Fangs, because enemies should be poisoned through the Constricting Tendrils and Poison Creeper bonuses. With those sets, we should be able to deal a lot of damage and just kill enemies faster than they can pretty much hit us. We also can immobilize pucks, so it will be much harder for them to close the distance and fight us. So focusing on Seneschal, I don't really think it's that important for leveling, but if you have additional bonuses, you can pretty much do that. Most of the time I just use a reconstruct because we will need some healing here and there, but you can also use Flash of Adrenaline if you need more damage. It works pretty good with Safeguard, and 45 you will have one of those. As an attacking skill, we can pretty much use something like Tempest, because it's a really strong skill right now. Together with Mockery support, efficiency for additional critical strike chance, which should synergize pretty well with the whole build, and Swift support, just to make sure Tempest will be used much more often. However, it's not really that important what you will have up for the construct. Don't worry about that even if you don't have anything, and just focus on leveling if you want to get 100 faster. Talking about what dungeons to run and what activities you could do, I think Lightning Storm Druid should be really good in almost all types of activities. Right now, it's a really good way to just run Nightmare dungeons, or you can also focus on Vaults, because Vaults after the patch provide a lot of experience as well. That way you can just try to get like Nightmare dungeon with Vaults, or just focus on normal Nightmare dungeons. For normal Nightmare dungeons, I can pretty much recommend a really good dungeon such as Gore Ruins, such as Blind Burrows, or Champion Demise, because it's always the best to have dungeons with a huge density when you can just kill pucks with your huge AoE from Lightning Storm. So take activities that you will like the most, and I'm sure you will get 100 pretty fast. So that was my Lightning Storm leveling Druid build. I think right now it's one of the strongest leveling builds. It's not really running that fast, but AoE pretty much compensates for everything. If you will have like right aspects and will stack some items on top of it, the damage will be just great. That way you can just decimate pucks in seconds and get your experience much faster that way. Thank you very much for watching, please like and subscribe for more RPG content, and see you next time.